why don't we start with what's happening with localization of content? There was some discussion this morning about that. But all of you, for all of you, I know that producing localized content in Asia is important. So, Ricky, why don't I sort of start with you to ask you about what do you think is how important is localization for Turner, and what are your plans going forward?
I think the importance of localization doesn't need to be elaborated in this room at all. I think it's been the amount of efforts made in this room on localization stress the importance of being relevant to the market. On the case of Turner, I think we have Cartoon Networks and Pogo in India. Cartoon Networks for the region. Cartoon Network is localized to the region. It's not only dubbed, it's re-scripted to be voice over so that the content itself is not just relevant, the trending to the young audience is relevant. For example, the same, you will have a lot of reference to the Taiwanese artists where the kids are familiar with into the script itself, so the script is rewritten to make sure that the young audience still understand what the humor is all about. Pogo obviously is slightly different. So a lot of the content there is made for Indian market, with a lot of the stories are Indian based. Obviously, the kids grew up with them and they watch them and they love it. That's why there's no surprise that in India particularly, both Cartoon and Pogo is #1 and #2 channel, and Cartoons remain as one of the top kids channel. I use one of the top because Rob is there. We're going to get into an argument on that one. Yeah. Kids channel in the region. I think the localization play a big part of it.
Yeah, thank you. Jonathan, why don't you tell us about the success of Serangoon Road and your plans for Grace and other shows?
Yeah, obviously this was we've embarked on producing some original content in Asia, and the first 3 things we've done have actually all worked remarkably well. I think it's quite gratifying, and I think it shows there is interest in local stories, local actors, etc. I mean, some of the ratings for Grace we're comparing with Game of Thrones, which in our territories is fantastic. So it's definitely something we will look to do more of. The issue is always budgets and costs and how much you're going to spend, and obviously you work on co-production because that saves you a few quid, but it has other compromises. But no, I think it's definitely going to be part of our plans now going forward, and I think you'll see more and more from us.
Thank you. Zubin, when we were speaking earlier, you said that many markets in Asia, China, India, Korea, they've got big history of telling stories. How is Fox planning to take that forward?
Yeah, I think it's a good point, and maybe if nothing else but to stir up some controversy, I'll make a counterpoint. It's obvious that product made from a market for that market is going to, all things being equal, going to do really well. That's pretty obvious, and therefore everybody is talking about localization content. But I think equal to relevance is the point that a good story is a good story is a good story, and we are all in the storytelling business. And products, whether they're made from Hollywood, especially Hollywood, I think are the masters of this. They've become very good at telling these stories, and therefore, in a way, just because you make something locally doesn't mean necessarily it's going to be a better product for the consumer. All things it will be. So I think we have to nuance it to some degree. And then, of course, coming closer to home, you do have markets like Korea, Japan, arguably, emerging China, etc., where that product has traveled really well across markets over here because they've had a rich history of making product for a long time and have developed that storytelling expertise. From our point of view, we operate in multiple segments. So I'll start with a very less obvious one, let's say sports. We look at sports also, it's the same conundrum. Do we continue buying international sport which does well, but for a certain segment of the audience, and you have to pay a lot for it, and every time the renewal comes up, you basically have to pay a lot more for it? Or do you invest in local sport, which hopefully will be very relevant, but has the challenges currently of being possibly not as good quality, etc. And essentially the way we look at it is we've bought ourselves some air cover for the next 5 to 10 years by having a strong presence in international sport, but we'll use the next few years to build out the local sport in that space. So obviously nobody else over here really is doing too much of sport, which is why I brought it up. Right. But the same goes true for Chinese movies, where we are investing in movies, we're investing in Chinese dramas, and even content that you might not think obvious. For example, we have a channel called Fox Traveler in India, which has been recently rebranded to Fox Life. We have a show there called Life Mein Ek Baar, which is once in a lifetime, show about these 4 very pretty women, which always works on TV. And they go around chasing their bucket list. We put it in Southeast Asia, and actually it scored better than many of the shows from the studios, other than Rob's, obviously. But it's rated really well. And it showed that a product made in India in the lifestyle category actually can work on a channel like Star World over here. So I think there is a lot of opportunity.
Rob, just before you come on, in terms of content that travels, Ricky, do you find that there is content that you can make in one part of Asia and that can travel to other parts?
I think we live in a phenomenally great time.
Yeah.
I mean, listening to Zubin earlier, I mean, Indian content now works, Hindi content now works in Indonesia. You can cross over. And Korean content now dominates the whole Asian scene, actually. And format being reproduced in Chinese in China. So it does very well. Our own experience has been producing in animations, and we produce animation not just for India, we also produce animations for the whole region. And we don't force our sister company to take it. But with one of our animation, actually, the rest of the markets are interested outside Asia alone. So there is that possibility of producing animations that they have the ability to travel. Right. And Japanese animation has, over the years, shown that already, actually. And what we are doing is, to make that happen by Cartoon Networks, and that can travel around the world. The show is called Exchange Student Zero. It's a mix of cartoon character with anime, so there's a bit of Asian characters in it, but yet has the ability to be, across all culture, across all kind of language barrier, basically.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Rob, last but not least, what are your views on localizing content and Disney's plans for the future?
Well, I think we're very fortunate to be in the most diverse and fastest growing region in the world. And so, Asia is a fantastic place to try and build our brands. But I agree with Zubin that really at the heart of the relevance is great storytelling. And I don't think of it as localization. I think of it as local relevance. So we have various different techniques or ways that we do that. I mean, it can be everything from creating an original movie like we did in India with Virat, or it can be reversioning some of our shows. So Amazing Race has had several runs across different markets of reversion for those local markets. We do the same thing with Disney Channel with some of our US shows in India. But there's also, for our movies, we actually look at, it's not a matter of dubbing or languaging, we actually look at the process of making it locally relevant. So our dubbing group is called Disney Character Voices. So we actually cast the characters for the voices when we language those movies. There is one Baymax, one Mickey voice, one Elsa voice. It's a consistent voice across these markets. And even in the translation, we don't look at literal translations, we look at transcreation, more to keep it relevant. But we also look at expanding the experience. So with those movies, we look at creating music videos. We did a music video of Let It Go in Malaysia. And even, we've got a video we released recently called The Glow, which we work with local artists, local talents like Sarah Geronimo in the Philippines, to create a video which brings together some of our properties, but makes it relevant to that local audience. Perhaps even more exciting is something you were touching on in your presentation, which is the emergence of multi-channel networks. So obviously Disney bought Maker Studios, and Maker really is, it does many things, but one of the things that is most interesting about Maker is it's a way of working with local talent. Think of it as a talent development pipeline. It provides opportunities for talent, YouTubers to create a proposition. It could be a hairstyle show, it could be an unboxing show, it could be a comedy show like Wild Banana. And it gives them a platform to explore that, to develop that, and expand on it. And so it's a fantastic local talent generation tool. It's one we're very excited about in the future.
It's picking up one of the questions from the audience around co-productions. and whether they worked or how well they worked. Jonathan, you produced, HBO produced Serangoon Road with a co-production. I mean, can you talk about how well that's worked and how you see co-pros going forward?
Well, I think the beauty of co-productions is you share the risk and you don't have to spend so much money. But the negative, obviously, is, you know, perhaps stories get compromised, perhaps ideas get compromised, working with different crews may or may not compromise things. I think it's horses for courses. You've got to sort of, for us, a producer came in, suggested the idea, he was working on it, he had an Australian broadcast company interested, he was looking for an Asian company, and you know, it just resonated, it got us going. I mean, I think that was the important thing about that. He did all the groundwork, getting the investment in. And for us, very much a learning exercise, and you know, it helped us start. The second one, Grace, we did all by ourselves with support from the MDA, but it's an easier thing when you do it yourself. You're in control of every element of it. But I think co-productions are not going to go away. We're talking to several companies already about co-productions. I think, as everybody's said, it is about stories. It is about you know, how relevant or not they are. And I think co-productions will be here to stay. We'll certainly do more of them, and I'm sure others will as well.
Yeah. And the question I had, I suppose, for all of you, is about competition. That in these local markets, there's more and more content being produced by producers locally, you know, at a price point that works for them. And many of these markets, at least in Southeast Asia, are quite small and free-to-air dominated. So how, you know, and you are sort of great international media companies, how do you sort of compete against, you know, that sort of challenge? Jonathan.
I'll just say one thing on that. I mean, I think one of the issues we have is a good thing and a bad thing. Having the HBO name is obviously a good thing, but of course everybody expects production to be of a quality that
Yes.
HBO produces.
Yes.
Now, obviously, HBO spends millions on content production, far more than we have available. So it's a tricky one, because obviously production budgets in Asia can be tiny, but unfortunately they then look tiny. So we're in a slightly difficult position, because you get judged by what your parent is doing, but at the same time you have to do something of sufficient quality. So it's definitely it's an issue, but I think we will be spending significantly more per episode than is the norm in Southeast Asia at the moment. You know, the production is one of these wonderful things that there is no sort of price list.
Yes.
People just spend whatever they have,
Yes.
and it's a difficult one to get your head around sometimes.
Sure. Ricky, you have a view on that?
I think the question you asked, how do you compete with your local free-to-air, per se, in terms of local productions and make yourself more relevant?
Yeah.
I don't think we compete with the local free-to-air here, because, you know, the pay TV audience pay subscription they get content that's relevant to them at the same time. The local free-to-air has an objective to fulfill with nationality and everything else. At the end of the day, I think as long as we produce relevant and quality content, the viewers will come to watch it. And our goal is not to see who is more relevant, and my goal is to make sure that our contents are compelling, whether it's produced out of the US and then re-scripted like the way Rob mentioned it, re-scripted for the local audience so that the relevance is there, the humor remains the same, it's just as funny, remains our focus per se. And you know, no one producer, no one TV company can do everything. That's why you have a whole group of us here. So you know, we all focus on slightly different things, and we all learn from each other's mistake and do a better job. A consumer today has more great shows than ever before, which is a great thing. And you know, whether it's from the local free-to-air or from the pay TV platform, the competition definitely has driven the quality of content higher and the quantity of the content higher at the same time.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. Let me move on to another topic, and a topic that's of interest for many people in the audience, and that's with OTT developments in Asia. So there are, you know, not a week goes by without a big announcement of on OTT. So it's here, and we are living in it. I suppose the thought is that OTT users are increasing, consumption's increasing, but the revenue per user isn't there where what pay TV platforms are used to. So given, and there's clearly a risk of cannibalizing pay TV revenues. But it's hard to ignore this trend. It's there. You can't just wish it away. It's here with us. So I suppose my question for you is how are you coping, or how are you looking to cope with this dynamic? Rob, let me start with you.
Sure. I think OTT is a fantastic opportunity to continue doing what we all set out to do, which was create great content experiences for consumers. Yeah. What is happening is, obviously, you see the rapid rollout of smart devices, whether it's a phone or a tablet, and rapid increase in connectivity and data speeds. So people have more options by how they consume the content. So that's what an OTT platform provides you the extra opportunities to do. I think what's really interesting in Asia, and certainly in the Southeast Asian markets that I look at, is the major global players are not here today. And many of the existing platforms, whether they're cable, satellite, or telcos, already have established relationships with consumers. And they have looked at the experiences elsewhere and are saying, how do I create compelling experiences, over-the-top experiences for consumers? The other thing to keep in mind is that an OTT experience in a local market, while it still needs to have a great user interface and have the most compelling content, it needs to be packaged and distributed and marketed and sold, priced to consumers in a way that's relevant to behaviors in those markets. So there isn't a one-size-fits-all approach to OTT. But it just extends the consumer experience. I mean, we've seen with the emergence of these new platforms, there's more TV being watched overall. So it's very possible to complement existing services, and we're seeing that with authenticated services. Take StarHub here in Singapore. We launched a watch app, Watch Disney Channel, Watch Disney Junior, Watch Disney XD. It's an authenticated service. It provides additional value to existing subscribers, but it provides the services that you would want to get from an OTT if you want those kids' channels. And HBO does that incredibly well too. All of the partners on the platform do or are looking at those opportunities. It's very exciting. And so OTT just provides more ways to create those experiences. We just have to work with great partnerships to be able to bring that to consumers sooner, so we create legitimate opportunities.
And that is a challenge. Zubin, what are Fox's plans for OTT?
I can't tell you. But what I can say is it is actually an opportunity. It could be a problem if we screw it up, but hopefully we won't. The existing incumbent players over here have a big edge because, as Rob said, they have all the existing relationships, the scale in the market and all of that. And it's relatively simple for them to roll out extended OTT services. I think the other area is something that you touched on briefly in your presentation, which is it actually allows us to move from this per household revenue model that we are all stuck with to a per user model. Yeah. So theoretically, you can significantly increase consumption as well as revenue by moving to that. A good example would be Indonesia, even though it's a very cliched one where penetration is still something like single digits for pay TV. And mobile phones are between 5 and 10 times more, depending on who you believe. So there's a massive opportunity to get content into the consumer's palm and charge for it. I think in the most simplistic sense, it's like that. As a company, we are close to OTT ready in the sense that most of what we have in terms of content, we have rights cleared for OTT. I say most because all the stuff that Rob has to give us, he's still holding out on. But when we operate in sports and we have a product for that, on the factual side through National Geographic, we have a product for that. Similarly on the Chinese side and hopefully at some point on Hollywood side. And our idea is really to work with our existing partners to help them extend their services in that space. And potentially get them to work with telcos. A really good example is what's happened in Japan, where it's a market which, for over 10 years has been in stagnation for pay TV. It's been stuck at about 11 million households for well over 10 years. And everybody gave up on that market and said, there's no way you can ever get more pay TV going. And along came Docomo, the telco, who did a partnership with a local aggregator called Avex. They launched an OTT service primarily of Hollywood content and some local movies, etc. And lo and behold, in less than 3 years, they got 5 million subscribers. In a market where for 10 years, you could just get 11 million, right? So the
same content was available on TV.
Yeah, pretty much. But it was an on-demand experience, whereas TV is mostly linear, etc. And it was a lower price point, all of that. And they had the benefit of bundling with their telco. So there are definitely things that are not necessarily duplicable, but it just shows you what you can do in a market. And so we want to work with people like that to extend the content, essentially. There's a big opportunity, I think.
Yeah, I think obviously OTT is the buzzword, if it is a word, I don't know. It's an interesting one. I think like a lot of these things, it's a technological change that is allowing content to be watched in a different way than it was 5 years ago, kind of thing. And I think, it's interesting what is an OTT player and what isn't an OTT player. Say, take the UK, Sky Television as an example. Sky Television is a fantastic pay TV operator. And yet they are now in the OTT business in a big way because everything they have is available on the internet. So I think you're getting existing companies are using the technology that is becoming available to extend the distribution of their services and extend the opportunities people have to watch their content. And I think you're going to see that more and more in Asia. As you said, Masoni mentioned StarHub, but you've got Astro. They're all launching an OTT platform which is allowing people who are already paying for content to be able to pay and watch that content elsewhere. So I think I'm not totally convinced you're going to see a totally new OTT player coming into the Asian market and going, wow. I think you're going to see existing players extend their OTT offerings. You're going to see both from platforms and from channels, and I think it will become like a lot of these things. Everybody will use the opportunities that the technology allows to be used for.
Good point. Ricky, how do you see, what's Turner's view on OTT and what are your plans?
I think there are three groups of consumer out there. There's a group that's paying for pay television, and thank God those groups are still growing for the next 5 years, which keep us all employed in this room. And it's growing about 6 to 8% easily. So the pay TV in Asia is still growing. And our job, I think, in this room is to try to make sure that groups continue to grow in that manner. And one of the ways which the panel has addressed is to make sure that we have the right digitally to play with our partners, that the same content that they watch on pay television, they pay for pay television, can be viewed on the devices, basically. I mean, no one has done a good job on TV everywhere, and neither has Asia done a good job on TV everywhere. It's still not too late for Asia. I think there's still a chance for the operator to work with the content partner to do a much better job on that one. So that's more defensive, I think, to look at how we defend the growth of pay television. There's another group of consumer who probably doesn't want to pay for pay television the way the platforms are organized right now, the way the content bundles are organized right now, that they would like to still pay for content they want to watch Game of Thrones, for example, and they want to watch all the seasons from the first one to the current one, and they want to pay a lot of money to Jonathan to watch it. And we should be able to try to reach out to those consumers and reach out to them, because they expand the ecosystem, they do not restrict the ecosystem. Same idea, if parents want to buy Adventure Time for their kids to watch from the first season to the last season, I don't think we should block it, see it as a risk, see how we can reach out to these people who are willing to pay for good content and bring it in-house and being part of the ecosystem. And there's the other group who were just pirates and do everything. I mean, our job is to make sure that group grows smaller, doesn't grow bigger. I see if we do a good job, the OTT will be part of the whole ecosystem by growing it further. The problem right now is the OTT systems is very attractive because it's free to most consumers. And they can watch a lot of stuff in very gray market also. But the money for most of the players in this room is on the pay TV side. We see as, if we don't do a good job, it will become a threat. If we do a good job, this would be an opportunity to grow the whole ecosystem.
Good point.
I think I'll just add one thing to that. I think we touched on it. Ricky said the magic word, piracy. I think it is something that governments and regulators are going to have to look at, because we get criticism sometimes. We're showing Game of Thrones censored or behind the US because we have to censor it, yet illegal pirated services are fully available in territories and nobody does anything about it. And yet if we want to put a fully uncensored version of our content into these same territories, we're actually not allowed to. So, and I think that is, you know, if you're offering a legal alternative, I think, you know, regulators are going to have to work with the industry because, you know, we are being put at a disadvantage on that, and I think it's a valuable point. And if some people say, I want to see this totally uncensored, etc., the only place they can currently see things is illegal pirated websites.
And talking about business models, you know, talking about encouraging people to pay, and certainly I touched on that, and Zubin, you mentioned, you know, exploring different business models. Netflix has a business model where the subscriber pays a monthly amount. It's called subscription VOD. I'd like to hear your views on what's likely to work in different parts of Asia.
Sure. We are very committed to the dual stream model pretty much around the world. So we tend to be in the pay television business where we actually get paid, hopefully. There are tactical exceptions we'll make. Like in the Middle East, we have a few free-to-air channels because the pay TV market is barely 1 million subscribers out of 50 million paid, you know, free homes. So there'll be sometimes we'll get exception, but generally we look to pay. So when you're talking about OTT, I think certainly if you're talking about Southeast Asia, where I suspect the number of OTT subscribers to start with are going to be relatively small, then within that, if you're looking at an advertising-based model, I think it's going to be difficult. The people who are most successful, unfortunately, at the advertising-based model are the pirates. And it's going to sound like all of us are on the same page, which we are, because it is a real issue, and it's come to the point where it is threatening not just the birth of OTT itself, which it is, but also our traditional, you know, business. And ultimately, if we don't create the right amount of revenue, you can't invest in the content engine. I'll give an example. We have a show called The Walking Dead, which admittedly is a very strong show, but it was pirated 25 times more in Manila than it was in Los Angeles. So much for people who say local content is all that works, but you know, unfortunately, it's all being stolen. And you know, now you have this situation with the VPNs, especially in Singapore, all these places where they are blatantly advertising the ability to go and log on to Netflix and you know, other sites from China, etc. That's nothing short of stealing. But they're getting away with it, as Jonathan says, and the playing field is completely uneven for legitimate operators like StarHub, etc., and ultimately ourselves. So that's an issue that obsesses all of us, and we meet with the government all the time to push for that. And there are ways to turn this around, but it's got to be done at an industry level. And I think that's something that the industry needs to do better.
And all of you have mentioned kind of the authenticated OTT service through, you know, legitimate platforms and well-known platforms in these territories. There's also a trend coming out of America about on standalone OTT services from, you know, well-known media companies like yourselves. And I'm just concerned about Asia. Are there any plans? What do you think is likely to happen in the next 3 years, or standalone OTT services? Anyone choose?
We're all going to reluctantly sit quietly.
No, I mean, I think we look at it at two levels. There is what I would call the defensive play, which is the TV everywhere. We don't call it OTT, but you can call it what you want, which is an authenticated service where if you are a subscriber to our channels, you will get a lot of the product on a catch-up basis. And you know, that's a way to ensure that people have an online destination which is on demand, so they don't need to go out and download from BitTorrent or something else. And that's available really for next to nothing to our subscribers, pretty much. But that caters to the current ecosystem, and that's fine. But you also, I think, need to find a way to go, especially in markets which are not well penetrated, to come up with a complementary product that does not cannibalize necessarily, but extends the ecosystem, right. As Ricky alluded. And I think you got to find a way to reach out to those people who want to consume television, but possibly not in the way traditional pay TV operates. And the fact is, consumption of television has gone up more than ever. It's just that they're watching it in some way where we're not getting compensated for it. Yeah. So I think that's what you call OTT, which we call OTT, and that'll happen. I think for sure the existing platforms will launch their OTT players, and we'll be supportive of those. It's already happening. Probably a telco or two will attempt to get in the space, but to my mind, that is just like what telcos did 5 years ago when they got into the IPTV space or the DTH space, etc. You know, it's just one more affiliate to us. It's quite possible that a global player will try to get into this market. We'll see.
Yeah.
When we obviously technology does remove the barrier to entry for ourselves as well as our platform partners to get these things going. So we'll see how it plays out.
I mean, I think we could spend
Is that a good
hours on
dodge?
this topic, but it's a good dodge. So let's, I don't think I'm going to get any more out of you guys on OTT than this. So let me move on to another topic.
Because we don't know.
Let's talk about the youth, or targeting the youth. And why is that important? Well, at least in Asia and in developing Asia, a significant proportion of the population is youth, or young, shall we say, 15 to 29. Yet content for this segment is kind of patchy. And so I suppose we're going to ask each of you what your plans were. So starting with Rob, you mentioned Maker. You've got various properties that can target the youth. What are you doing and what are your plans going forward?
Well, I wouldn't agree with your comment that the content is patchy for the youth. I think there is a lot of great content for youth across lots of different platforms. A couple of ways of looking at it. So when we talked earlier, you were mentioning youth as young adult. So Disney obviously has a whole kids and tween demographic. But let me talk about the young adult segment for a session. In Japan, young adults are our primary target audience for Disney, even more so than children. And the way we do that, we create products and services for them. They're already Disney fans. They grew up with the characters. They've gone to the theme park in Japan. And they're big fans of the Disney characters. So we create products and services for them. So you mentioned Docomo earlier on. We have a Disney mobile on Docomo. It's a Disney-branded handset with 20 Disney movies that they can actually, through a dongle, stream to their TV. They've got Disney shows they've got our shows for young adults, which are on a channel, broadcast satellite channel called D-Life. So we create a product and service for that audience. Whether it's Marvel or Star Wars, we also have product that's actually targeting young adult. And one of the benefits of our business model is we're integrated. So we have a film group, television, consumer products, and games. So we actually extend the experience across those areas. So for example, with Marvel and Star Wars, there's a big focus on extending the experience beyond the film and the TV shows like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. into fashion. So we're starting to have fashion events and fashion designs for our products business. We have games that are developed in the region for Marvel and for Star Wars. So several of the content experiences are created across those areas as well. We take our existing shows, ABC, ABC Family, and we work with existing players like Fox and Sony and Universal and other partners in the linear business. But also the OTT provides another opportunity for those who didn't get to see it on the channels to maybe see it on other platforms afterwards. But the last part, which we said, is Maker. Maker very actively targets that young adult audience. And the flexibility of a platform like YouTube and the nature of short form, it's very short form driven online content, enables different genres to be explored. You can try different things. The investment cost is much lower because it's very user generated and YouTuber generated. And so you can try lots of different formats without the huge investment cost that we have to do for linear or movies. And when you find a winning format, it's got a huge platform to reach lots of people. So that's perhaps one of the most interesting areas for us to reach large audiences.
Thank you. Zubin, what are your views on targeting the youth, and how do you see, what role do you see MCNs playing in that?
Yeah, you already asked the youngest man on the panel. So. Well, actually, just coming back to our business, when we look at our brands, we don't segment them anymore by demographics of 15 to 39 or 29 or whatever. Just, first of all, it's too broad, and secondly, we prefer we think consumers want to see it as a consumer benefit. So, and then within that, you can have SKUs, obviously. So, for example, we have a National Geographic, which, the proposition is smart entertainment, and within that, typically, people who are about 30, 35 plus tend to watch it, but there are a whole lot of young people watching it too. And conversely, we have a Channel M. That proposition is Korean K-pop culture entertainment. And, again, there are whole really old people watching it also, but typically it tends to skew younger. So I think at least in the television environment, the traditional linear space, we tend to segment by consumer benefit and not demographics. Having said that, obviously there are places where, from a distribution pipeline point of view, younger people are going. I don't think everyone can do everything other than Rob, who does everything. So, they have their maker, which I think is a great business. We don't currently have anything like that over here. But, it's a different business, actually. And if we are to stick to our pay TV roots, then we see our growth coming in terms of extending what we have now from a content development point of view of ownership of more content and more control editorial on the one side, and then using this new technology of OTT, et cetera, to extend our experience to more people that way. And I would say that MCNs are, some of the, you look at YouTube, and the amount of piracy that's allowed on that particular MCN is outrageous. So, we are actively actually pulling off our content of some of these players. But it's great to have legitimate players like Maker, et cetera, who are developing content for that ecosystem, and probably at some point there'll be a convergence and we can put some of our products onto that.
Thank you. Jonathan?
Well, I think demographics are an interesting one. My kids would happily watch Dad's Army as watching Walking Dead or Game of Thrones. I think the issue with a younger audience at the moment is the issue of reaching them in the first place, and I think that's really the crux of it. I think HBO certainly has made shows that you could argue are targeted at the younger generation, things like girls. Obviously Game of Thrones covers a wide spectrum, but I think it very much hits the sort of younger demographic. But I think, when we say younger people, 21 plus, 22 plus, if that's what we're talking about, they're actually adults and are usually very intelligent and have lots of broad interests, and I think are happy to watch lots of series, and there's so much great television being made. I think the problem is getting that show in front of somebody and hoping you hook them and they stay, because I think one of the great issues with television now, there are so much great television, so many episodes being made, you've got to commit to a show. And this is becoming increasingly a problem for me because, you can't watch everything. So, if you see, I just watched Blacklist, actually. I finished it, and I was so annoyed when nothing happened at the end of the season 1. And I'm thinking, I still don't know, so I've now got to commit another 20 hours to find out what happened. And I think it's one of the things we discuss when we're making programming. Should we have a beginning, a middle, and an end? Is that really what's now become increasingly important, because people are limiting the amount of time. They are committing to shows. You have to commit to shows now. And I think, and younger generation, younger people have probably a lot more interests, a lot more other things to do. So it's getting them on the hook, and then hopefully they see it through.
Thank you. Ricky?
I think a few weeks ago when the CNN digital team gave out a pop quiz in the office, there's just a group of us sit together to look at a pop quiz, and they list out a list of top story of the week, actually, and ask the room which one is the top story, and some people would say the Hong Kong protest, the Ebola, and everything. I think the entire room got it wrong, except for me, actually. I got the Hong Kong Premier saying that please do not build any more ugly building. And the reason why I got it right is because my daughter told me so the week before, that there was the news that came out on CNN. So, it clearly shows that there's a group of viewers who watches the linear channel, and those are their top news. There's also a group of viewers who watches it on social media, on the CNN social media, on the CNN digital, and that's the kind of news they seek to watch. It's not protest or Ebola, but it's ugly building. So, they like the story, and my daughter told me so. So I got the answer correct. I think the other factors that we look at youth audience, we have a channel called Wonder TV, and we're trying to skew it a bit younger after I took over. And we add in shows like Gotham's and Arrows, and to make the shows with some of the DC comics in there to be a lot more younger skewing. And one of the reasons for doing so is because the advertiser wants a younger audience also. And you can have great viewership, but if you don't have the younger audience in your mix itself, it fails to become a advertising proposition as a whole. So I think, there's still that needs to reach out to them, and that's why we mix shows into the mix to make sure that the younger audience remain on the channel, be able to watch it first before any other devices, any other sources. I think that's advertising remain one of the attractions for us to stay young and reach out to young people.
Thank you. I'm just sort of mindful of time, so I'm just going to ask you guys about one last topic, and that's on analytics and use of social media. We've heard a lot about people saying how they're using them in content production, in content exploration, in programming, and so on. So how, I suppose what I wanted to ask you guys is, how do you use social media and analytics to shape your content and the way it's produced? Rob, start with you.
Well, I think you asked how it's produced. I think the production part of things, it's in Asia, it's probably a little bit earlier at this point in time in terms of how it's actually shaping the production storylines and the development of characters, but it's a very interesting opportunity for traditional television and film. I think when we talk user-generated content or we talk YouTube or other platforms, I think there are ways of extending it and being involved actively in terms of who you source to work with on talent and how you actually create it. I think the most interesting segment for the next couple of years is how social media, how analytics tools and social media is used as a platform for discovery. I mean, Jonathan was mentioning earlier about how important it is to find which show you want to watch and how you want to consume that kind of content. Particularly now, linear TV is one option of viewing, but you have non-linear. So it's possible with a group of your friends to schedule your own viewing event and then use the social media to comment and engage in a different way, whether you're in the same room or you're somewhere else. We're increasingly using social media to market our movies. It's a very, very important platform for marketing movies. We have fan bases for Marvel, fan bases for Star Wars. And our latest movie, Big Hero 6, which we launched with a Hug Baymax campaign. And it really brought the character alive long before anybody sat in the movie theater to be able to see it. So they have an emotional connection with that character. They can engage with that character even before you've actually launched the movie. And that just makes the experience of going into a theater, wanting to watch it again, watching it on Fox or on HBO, watching it, renting it later. It's something that's personal. And so social media is that engaged community. And you need to, I think for all of us, we're looking more actively about how we can actually use that platform to engage and help discover our content.
Zubin?
Yeah, I agree. I think we've not yet reached the point where we are actively using it in some very sophisticated way to develop content, but it's much more right now in the discovery phase of trying to, market it out to our fans. Internally, we say we have brands with fans, and where better can you get fans than social media? In fact, our National Geographic fan page is the second biggest or most followed fan page in the world, Facebook page, after I think it is MTV, if I remember right, with some 60 million. That's an incredible number, and great way to reach out to these people. So I think that's where we are right now. We have tried in some markets going beyond that, figuring out a way to monetize it by creating some sponsorships that run across both traditional media as well as social media, etc. We're scratching the surface. We've seen some success, but still a long way to go, I think.
Jonathan, your views on social media?
I'm probably the wrong person to ask about anything about social media. So actually, I've really got nothing to say. I mean, we do use it hugely, but I'm sorry. I'm very unqualified on social media.
Ricky?
I tend to echo Jonathan's view, actually. We scratched the surface, I would say. But, you talk about big analytics, and there's something else on top of that. Look, I mean, there's everything that Zubin and Rob mentioned. I think all the companies are doing it to engage the fan base. When I launch a channel, the first 6 weeks, I look at the social media pages, how much fans grow. But if we talk about big data, I think right now is a very good time because all the pay TV operators have very big data coming in. And we still unable to understand what those big data are because, I think it's still very primary. And once those are able to share with the content provider, and then we can layer in some of the social media fan groups that we see, that will come out more meaningful. But we are scratching the surface. There's nothing much I can talk about at this point in time.
Well, thank you. And just to bring this session to a close, Ricky, what do you think are the prospects for the industry over the next 3 years?
Well, I said earlier the industry is still growing all the way to 2020. And I think one of the things that we must do is to make sure that the TV sets at home is the legal one. the device is still also the legal one and not a legal viewing. I think that's important. That I don't know what you call it, whether it's SVOD services or TV everywhere, that we must make sure that both, whether it's the personal device or the TV sets, are both legal devices for viewing legal content, obviously, is what I meant. I think if we do that well, the prospect for the ecosystem remain very good. At this point in time, pay TV is still growing. Some markets still low in penetration and still a lot more growth in front of us, actually.
Thank you. Yeah. Jonathan, what do you think are the prospects for the industry going forward?
Well, I think it's interesting. When you look back at the last sort of, 10, 15 years of television, there's been lots of new developments from sort of, HD is going to change the world, to 3D is going to change the world, to convergence is going to change the world, to now OTT is going to change the world, and nothing much has really changed. It'll be interesting. I think the industry adapts, and I think it is very good at adapting, and I think at the moment, the model that the pay TV channels are using and the platforms are using, I think will evolve. We will use the technology more to our advantage. I don't see fundamental changes. I just see gradual changes. We are going to see, other devices are now well entrenched. I don't know if anything new is going to change that, but I think, you can now watch what you like pretty much anywhere you want to watch it. I think the question for us is all to maintain our content as relevant and to continue to make money. And I think, I still see us working with our existing partners for many years to come in Asia. And, I think we will just try and adapt. And I think we have adapted very well. And I think, interestingly, as much as we're sometimes seen as the dinosaurs of the old television industry, I think the big media companies have adapted remarkably well in a lot of places.
Zubin? I think in a line the prospects are good, but we have to work harder than before, I think. As I said before, there's more consumption of television or video product than ever before. There are more devices out there than ever before. You would think that that's a bigger opportunity. And when you consider just a simple proposition of multi-channel television or its associated non-linear extensions, it's amazing because for a price of a meal, you get 24/7 entertainment at home across all your devices and every possible genre of catering to everybody in your family, something or the other. That's incredible if you think of the value proposition. So you can only screw it up from there. But if you just do the basics right, which is good pricing, packaging practices, and pushing out the boat in terms of distribution and all of these things, married with good content that's coming through, because it's US content is seeing a resurgence over the last few years, married with great practices that are coming down to local markets. So you put all of that together, you would think there's a great opportunity.
And Rob, you said Disney, as you set out, Disney is in a number of different businesses, in a broader set of businesses. What do you think are the prospects for the industry?
Well, I'm inherently an optimist, so I think they're very good. We've got incredible opportunity. We have a region of fast-growing markets. It's a really exciting time. No matter how many new platforms come along, there's still growth overall in viewing and consumption of great stories, great content that all the panelists here and many people in the room are involved in creating and bringing to consumers. So I see continued growth in existing businesses, and I see some very exciting new businesses coming along. And I think as long as we all stay focused on how to create the best consumer experience with the best content, the best stories, and there will be challenges. It's not going to be an easy path ahead. We're going to have to work out how to address these things. And in many cases, work together. I mean, many of us on the panel work together, and many people in the room, we work together to kind of create those experiences. But there's a growth opportunity, and that's really, really exciting. So I'm very positive on the future.
Thank you very much. Can you join me in putting a big hand, giving a big hand to my panel?